TV4RV has recently developed an exciting new product which will reduce the size of your dish by over 50% for easier storage. Our new improved Universal Folding LNB Arm Kit number 2 will fit any dish from DirecTV, Dish Network, Shaw Direct, and Bell. It will also fit some models of free-to-air dishes. If the LNB arm of your dish measures 1 7/8 inches wide by 7/8 inches thick, then this kit will fit your dish. Once installed, it makes folding up the LNB arm as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Loosen the T-knob. 2. Fold the arm up against the face of the dish. 3. Lock it in place. It's as simple as that. With the arm raised, this dish is over 50% smaller, making storage much easier. We know you will be just as excited to make this easy improvement to your dish. If your dish presently has our original Universal Folding LNB Arm Kit with the hinges, the good news is you can easily replace it with our new improved model, and half the work is done because the arm has already been cut. Just follow the directions for the rest of the installation. We're now going to detail a list of the tools that you'll need for this modification. Because there'll be some bare metal from the cutting and drilling, you're going to need a can of primer or some Rust-Oleum paint primer in satin granite color. You'll need a bench vise, a hammer. You might need a small block of wood and a pair of pliers. You'll need a C-clamp, a hacksaw with an 18-tooth blade, an electric drill with both 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch drill bits. You'll need a pop rivet gun, a square, and that could be a machinist square or carpenter square, even a small plastic square, a ruler, and a magic marker. Finally, you're going to need 2 7/16 inch wrenches, and depending upon which dish you're going to be working on, you may need a 1/2 inch wrench. You'll need a file that's about 1/2 to 3/4 inch wide, and a small strip of steel about 1 by 3 inches. Welcome to part 2 of our video. In this section, we're going to show you how to actually install our folding LNB arm kit onto this dish. The very first thing you should do, though, is remove the LNB from the arm. In this case, it was held on by 2 screws, which I've already removed. In some cases, there's a clamp mechanism. Either way, it's fairly easy and straightforward. You want to remove the LNB by wiggling it and pulling it out, and you also want to remove the cable that's in there. Now, if you have a 50-foot cable, just disconnect it here. But ideally, you want to have about a 3-foot cable that extends down the arm so that you can make a connection at the bottom. At any rate, we're going to discuss the differences of the connections of the arm and what you have to remove in order to complete this process. Now, in this particular case, this is a DirecTV slimline dish, one of 4 models that they make. It is held in place right over here by 4 5/16 hex bolts. The bracket that is held in place is actually welded to the arm so that when you remove the 4 hex bolts, the bracket and everything will come off together. Some models, there'll be 4 hex bolts over here, and when you remove the arm, there'll be no bracket there. Now that's important because when you cut it, you want this to go right up against the bracket or pretty close to it. So if you don't have a reference mark on that particular arm, it's going to be hard to judge where to cut it. So since this one already has the bracket on there, that's not a problem. But if you have the kind where you remove the arm and there's not going to be a bracket, then before you remove the arm, you want to make a little mark where the end of the bracket is. That's a part of your dish, so that you have a reference point to measure from to cut. Okay? Hope that's clear. Now, I'm gonna stop the video for a minute and just remove the arm because. Okay, now I have the LNB arm clamped into the vise with the bracket over here. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a cut 1 inch in front of this bracket. Okay, the reason for it is that this part of the arm is 1 inch wide. Okay, so basically that's going to slide on there in this direction. See if you can visualize that. So the part that swings is going to be over here. So you want 1 inch from the end of that bracket up here. So what I'm going to do is take my magic marker and my ruler and make a mark. 1 inch. Okay. Now I'm going to put my square on there and just draw the line. So now I have a line 1 inch in front of that. So if you were to put this like this here, you would see that it fits perfectly. Okay, it's right where you want to be. Now, what I'm going to do is continue that mark around both sides. Let me adjust my square. So I'll put this up against there, line it up with that mark, and make a mark on the side that aligns with the mark there. And then on the back side over here, we'll do the same thing. Okay, so now I have marks on 3 sides of the arm. Okay? Now, let me put the cap on here. Now what I'm going to do before I cut this is I'm going to turn it over, and on the back side, on either side of that where the cut will be, I'm going to put a small X. And I'll tell you why we're doing that further on in the video. Now, normally you would think the easiest thing would be just put it back in the vise and start cutting. Well, not to get the straightest cuts. So I'm going to show you our secret, how we do it. I'm going to cut the 2 sides first. So basically we're going to clamp it in with that up. And we'll get our hacksaw. And very carefully, actually, I like to leave the line, what they call leave the line. So I'm cutting just slightly to the left of the line. Okay? That gives me just a little extra metal as a precaution. Okay? So, and I want to try to cut it on that black line as straight as I can. So I start out making small cuts so I have a groove. There, you can tell when you've gone through. It's gone through in the back, but not quite in the front. So I'm just going to give it just a little more. A little more. There you go. Okay, now the line is still there. We're just slightly in front of it. So what I'm going to do is turn it the other way and do the same thing on this side. Again, I'm going to leave the line. That's why we need to paint. Okay, now we have the line. We left the black line there, and we got it on both sides. Okay, now what we're going to do, put that back in the vise the other way to make the top cut. Now, remember when I was explaining to you the various parts you needed? One is a little piece of straight edge metal. So what I'm going to do is put that on there like that as a guide, and then we take our C-clamp. We're going to clamp it in place. A little bit tricky. Get it right on there. Just like that. Just tap it. So what I'm trying to do is line this up with the cut on the the right hand side of that cut, so that when I put the blade against there, it'll meet with those two cuts that we made. Okay, right now it's lined up pretty good, so I'm going to tighten it down, and it wants to turn a little bit, so I may have to tap it just a touch there. Nice and tight. We just give it a little tap there, a little tap there. Looks good. So right now when I'm looking down, I can see that the two grooves that I cut, and it's lined up good. So I'm going to use that as a guide so I get a nice straight cut. Nice and slow, we begin cutting. For any of you that don't feel comfortable doing these, if you were to take this to like a metal fabricating shop, I'm guessing for between $10 and $20 they would do it for you. It's not they would have all the right equipment, and they could probably do it faster than I'm doing. But since I don't have a power hacksaw, we're doing it by hand. We're almost there. There. Now, once I've cut through, the grooves are already cut in the side, so I'm straight down the bottom. So I just have to, actually I can probably at this point take this clamp off, because I keep hitting it with the saw. No longer necessary. So now the two grooves act as a guide for making the bottom cut. Okay, now we've cut that off. We held the line. Looks good. Obviously we have rough edges where we cut everything. So we're going to take our file, here it is, and just kind of clean up the edges a little. When you're using a file, you're only cutting on the forward stroke. So just bear that in mind. Take that off. Just take off any burrs, just kind of round it off a little bit. You don't want anybody getting hurt. Now, you'll remember when we were drawing the lines and I had you put an X on the bottom. The reason being, once you cut this apart, a lot of the arms look the same, both sides practically, and it's hard to tell which was top and which was bottom. So by doing this, where's our other half? Here it is. We know that this X has the bottom there, and this X is the bottom here, so you're marrying the parts right back together the way they came apart. So that way, if you were slightly off with your cut, you won't have any problems. So that's the reason for the two X's. Okay, I'm going to finish filing these up and getting it ready for the next step. So I'm going to stop the video while I do that. Okay, we're back now after a small delay. I finished filing the rough edges off of this, and I put a layer of paint on there on all the rough edges like we talked about. Now, I didn't paint the other end yet because we have more cutting and drilling to do there. What we're going to do next is install the bracket onto this stub that's sticking out here. Now, as I mentioned, these tubings are all pretty much the same size, but there is a slight variation depending on different manufacturers and how they weld them together. So we've allowed for that in the manufacture of this bracket. So some of these brackets will slip right on. Others are going to need a little bit of more persuasion, which is why we recommended using a wooden block and a hammer. So let me show you, this one's going to need just a slight bit of persuasion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this into the vise right here. Now, let's see. Let's make sure we got the right direction. Okay. This is I can still see the slight X there. So this is the bottom of the bracket. This is how it goes in there. So it's important that we put this other part on the right way. Now let's put that on like that. Now this fits on like this here. Okay, as you can see, it's a little bit snug. So what I like to do is get the bottom on first, kind of get it started. You may have to just spread it slightly there. Okay, and then use this block of wood right over here and just tap it on. Okay, it should go on. It should go on right up against the other fixture, and if you do that, then you have just a little bit of metal overhanging. That's fine. Okay, so that's a good fit there, and because we're right up against that bracket, we know we're nice and square. Okay, so now the next thing to do is to pop rivet it in place. Okay, so what I'm going to do is mount this like this here. I'm going to get my drill. I got to plug it in too. Would help. Now I have my drill fitted with a nice sharp 1/8 inch bit. I'm going to drill 1/8 inch hole. I'm using the hole that's in the bracket as a pattern, and I'm doing the top first. Just in case there's any variations in the thickness up and down, you want the top to be right up against there like that. So I'm going to put it right in the hole, and I'm going to drill a hole through there. Oops. Okay. Before I drill the second hole, I'm going to put in the pop rivet and seat it, because just in case there's a slight bit of movement, you want them to align perfectly. So by putting this in, it's going to hold it in place, and it's not going to go anywhere. Just like that. Now we can drill the second hole. Make sure we're still lined up good. Yep, looks good. Okay, I'll put that one in. Okay. Now I'm going to turn around and do the other two. Now that we're locked in position, it's not going to go anywhere, so I can drill both of these holes and then put in the rivets. Okay. Okay, now the bracket is firmly in place, not going to go anywhere. Now, next thing to do is to position the arm into the bracket and drill a 1/4-inch hole for the pivot point. Now, what I like to do is I'll put this in the vise like this. Now, I'm putting in the bottom side up so that I can see where the joint is, okay? So because of that, remember we had the X, this is the bottom side. So we're putting that in just like that. And we're going to put it about a hacksaw width away from the other joint, okay? Because you want to make sure there's no rubbing or anything when we put it together. I'm going to use the C-clamp to clamp it to the top part of the bracket, okay? So again, we're putting it about a hacksaw width away, and by clamping it against there, I'm going to get in there. We want to make sure we're nice and flat. And just give it just a little tap, move it in there. Oh, there it is. It was slipping down. Okay, let me move that clamp just a little more forward, because we want it perfectly in position. There we are. That's better. Okay, now we're nice and straight, about a hacksaw blade away. So basically, we're in exactly the same position as it was before we cut it. Okay? Now, what we're going to do, I have to change the bit on my drill. Now we need the 1/4-inch bit. Always unplug your tools when you're changing bits, because you don't want the drill to accidentally start. We're taking out the 1/8-inch bit. We're going to put in the 1/4-inch bit. Okay, good. Now plug that back in. Okay, now using the 1/4-inch hole in the front side, that's the pivot hole, not the slotted hole. Using the 1/4-inch hole as a guide, we're going to drill through right there and make a nice hole. Okay, now you might be tempted to drill the other hole for the slot at this time. Don't. You want a nice precise hole, and you don't want any movement. So I'll show you what we're going to do. So now that we have that one drilled, we want to drill the one on the other side. So I have to turn this rig around a little bit here. So I'm just going to put it like this and clamp it in here. Now I'm going to drill the other 1/4 inch hole over here. Okay, and now take the hex bolt from your kit. You can remove it. We don't need it right now. We're just going to kind of stick it in the hole. Go all the way through. There we are. Like that. And we can put the nut partially on just to keep it from falling out, but it's not going to go anywhere. Now we know that that's kind of locked in position. It's not going to go anywhere. Now we can go back and drill the other 2 1/4 inch holes for the pivot point. Again, you want to use the top of the slot as your guide. Okay, then turn it around again, just like you did. It's the opposite of what we were doing. And make the hole on the other side. Okay, now you can put the other eye bolt in the other hole. Again, we're just doing it temporary right now, just to make sure everything is functioning properly. Okay. Where is it? There it is. Right there. Okay, that's in there. Okay, now we can take the C-clamp off because everything is drilled. Oop. And we're going to turn this over so that it's in position as it would be on your satellite dish. So basically what you would be doing, you loosen the T-knob, it would fold up, and then it would lock into place. So right now, that's moving perfectly. That's exactly what you want it to be doing. So we're going to remove the bolts, because before, let me tell you what we have to do next. We have to cut a slot in here for the cable. Originally, the cable went all the way down through and out the back end of your dish. But because we created a point there where it's going to pull, the cable can't go out the back of the dish. So we have to make a little port for it here. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. So basically what we want to do is we want to remove the arm. Take that out. Okay, and you can see where the holes we drilled are right in place. We're going to file the inside because there's some roughness there, and we'll get rid of that. And then I'm going to stop the video while we do that, and we'll come back with another segment. Okay, we're back now. What we're going to do is cut a small slot over here to allow for the cable to come out of the end of this section here. Now, depending upon your dish, you may have 1 cable, you may have 2, you might even have 4. So the width of that slot's going to be determined by the number of cables. In this case, this dish is a SWM, single wire, so there's only 1 cable coming out of it. So I'll show you what we're going to do. This is the bottom of the arm, okay? I'm going to clamp it into the vise. Now, using my magic marker in my square, I'm going to set this, I'm going to make a slot in the center. Oh, for a single cable, probably a 1/2 inch wide slot is more than enough. If you have 4 cables, then you're going to need probably maybe 1 3/8 might be. You'll have to measure them. So, I mean, the cables vary in thickness, so, you know, that's going to be a determination. So basically, I'm going to make my cut. I'm going to be making 2 cuts on here, about a 1/2 inch long. So I'm going to draw a line here, a 1/2 inch, okay? And then over here, just wide enough for the cable, another 1/2 inch, okay? So what we're going to do is just make 2 cuts, okay? Now, when I make the cuts, I don't want to cut the top part, I just want to cut the bottom. So I'm going to put it in the vise, sticking up like this. And then I have to hold the hacksaw at an angle so that I cut this side, but not the front side. And I'm using my finger as a guide and just making the cut. Come on. One. Two. Okay. Once I have that cut, I'm going to use my pliers and bend it outward at about a 45-degree angle. Okay? So that once it's done, it's going to look like that, like a little trap door. Okay? Now there's all rough edges, which you don't want on your cable, so you want to make sure you use your file and get rid of the rough edges. You may even want to round off the corners of that little tab a little bit, because they could be a little sharp. Okay. Now that that's done, and everything is filed smooth, you could put a coat of paint on this, which I'm going to do when I stop the camera, because we're going to be assembling it for the final time. Okay? So now we're ready to conclude our video by finally assembling all the parts that we've made and finishing the installation. All the parts have been filed, all the rough edges, and painted. This is all ready to go. So first thing we want to do is install the cable in the arm, because with the pivot bolts and the adjustment bolts in there, it'd be impossible to get the fittings past the bolts. So we want to put the cables in first. And what I've done is remove the cable from the LNB just to make it easier to work with. So the cable is in there. Now we're going to install the pivot bolt first. Now, depending upon whether you're left-handed or right-handed determines which way you put this bolt in. I'm right-handed, so I prefer to have the T-knob that I tighten and loosen on the right-hand side for me. That's just the way I am. You could do it either way. But the point is, wherever the T-knob is where you want the head of the hex bolt to be. So we're going to put it on this side. So first thing to do is line up that 1/4 inch pivot bolt, there it is, that we installed. Put the bolt in. Now I want to kind of get that cable under the bolt. Okay, so I got to kind of feel my way in. There it goes. I can feel it. And then find the hole on the other side and push it through. Okay, now we're going to put a washer on this side and then secure it with this nylock nut. Now the nylock nut will stay in position wherever you tighten it to, which is a nice feature. We're going to tighten it at enough and I'll show you how to get the tension just right. So let's just, got a little bit of thread, about a 1/2 inch thread sticking out there that we have to take up first. Let's get that tightened up. Okay, I can feel it just starting to tighten up now. Okay, now I want to have enough tension on that nut so that when I lift this, there's some resistance, and that the weight of the LNB doesn't make that come crashing down. That's just slightly loose. I'm going to give it just another little tweak. You can always, once you get it finally assembled, you can adjust that tension a little more or less to your liking. But there, I'll put that on there. That's better. Now we're going to put the other bolt in. Again, we want the T-knob on this side, so we're going to put it in from the other direction. Come on. There it goes. And we want to go over that cable. Come on. There it goes. Once you get it in, it goes right in. Okay. Over the cable. Put a washer on and the T-knob. There. Okay, now we're going to loosen the T-knob. So when you raise it, that cable is coming out of that little slot that we cut in there. Okay? So that prevents it from being damaged when it's closed. Make sure everything is working good. Yep, looks good to me. So when it's in the down position, it's straight exactly as it was before you cut it, and we can lock it in position. Okay? You got a nice solid LNB arm. In the raised position, you loosen it, raise the arm up. You can go all the way to the end, which generally will put your LNB head about 1 inch away from the dish. But because those heads are different sizes, if it's hitting the dish, you want to back off just a little bit so that it's not hitting the dish, and then lock it in place. That's all there is to it. Now you can replace your LNB arm onto the dish, install the LNB, and you're good to go.